Okay, so by the way of the fact that 141 years ago, the great French sculptor Auguste Rodin was commissioned actually to create a monumental artwork called the Gates of Hell. I thought we could talk about architecture and hell, because this is a theme that is very unlikely addressed in architecture. But it's just a sketch, really, because the theme is so complex and so large that it welcomes at any time additions and development. Architecture and loathing. It has to do with a lack of pleasure that existence could generate, and sometimes it does, if we are to be honest. I think all of us, from time to time at least, go through periods of loathing. The gargoyles in the medieval architecture. I mean, they are expressions of unpleasant feelings, so to speak. I mean, look at them. What made the medieval artist carve something like this? It showed despair. It showed fear. It shows, almost their inability to negotiate with life in positive terms. But we don't do this sort of thing now. But the truth is, our feelings towards existence, I don't think they are too different from their feelings at their time. I mean, look here. It's this animal that eats up the face of a human being. Now, this animal is maybe of an internal order, is a representation of a psychological reality, but nevertheless it exists and it shows fear. This is hell, of course. Like during a nightmare, you have a nightmare, and in the nightmare, unbelievable things happen, and you wake up in total disarray. There are monsters, many monsters that animate buildings in the past, very, very often. We don't do it any longer, but this doesn't mean hell is not present in contemporary architecture. It is, but it's not expressed, paradoxically, is not expressed as hell. Sometimes quite the opposite. It is expressed as a sign of civilization. For example, I can tell you, I once missed a bus. I will not tell you why I missed it. It's a long story, but I missed a bus in Columbus, Ohio, in the United States, and I took a walk through downtown Columbus. And Columbus is the capital of Ohio, an important city. But I have to tell you, what I saw there was architectural and urban hell. Hell. You walk for miles, you don't see a human being, maybe one, a drug addict or an alcoholic, broken windows, only cars and cars and cars, and truly an apocalyptical urban environment, totally inhuman. That is hell, in my opinion. And you look here, the medieval man was afraid, and out of those fears came these additions to the cathedral. And you wonder what made the medieval artist depict such scenes on the body in stone of the cathedral. Look, these are scenes of horror. Yes, life is difficult. It was difficult, it is difficult, and it will be difficult. It was always like this. But I think it is preferable to assume the difficulties of life and to express them. That's what Dante did. That's what Auguste Rodin did. Auguste Rodin, by sculpted monumental work, 6 meters tall and 4 meters wide, the gates of hell, for which he worked for many years, around 40 years, I imagine, since 1880 until he died, 1920 something, I think. And Dante also, in his Inferno, used his incredible literary skills to attack an essential part of what life is. Look at this. Again, what made the medieval man incorporate these beings into the building? They express something. They express maybe terror. They express abysmal discomfort with existence. In essence, hell. It is hell. These monsters express hell. And these are not the only examples. As I said, there are almost every church, any cathedral in those times depicted both paradise and hell. Look here, you see the human being just like us, and above that monster. Imagine yourself building a house, let's say a little house, even a gingerbread house today, and then have such a gargoyle that emerges from the wall, which also has the function that it spits out water from the rain or whatever, the melting down of snow. It would be a signal to those who see the facade of the building that there are forces in life that escape the control of reason, and such a figure evokes, I think, the drama of life, which is real, like here as well. I mean, these bulging eyes, they show terror. Is the terror, you could say, why should we frighten ourselves or frighten other people? I think if you assume openly the uncomfortable levels of existence, as the Americans say, the best way out of it is through it. So I think that if you do this, you have a chance to actually transcending certain miseries, because you assume them courageously, openly, and you didn't lie to yourself that there are no shadows, that there is no angst. There is. We all suffer, all of us, doesn't matter, short, tall, fat, thin, rich, poor, we all suffer. It's known. But it's one thing to say, I do suffer, and I have to acknowledge it, and to say, no, I do not suffer, when in fact you do suffer. And maybe those who say I do not suffer the most. Here there is suffering. There is, inexpressible angst. This person can talk. His face expresses the anguish, the inner anguish. The same here. This is hell. Now those people suffered in maybe not dissimilar ways than we did. Yes, they lived usually shorter lives than we do. They had their own share of pleasures in life, but also of sufferings. But again, how come that we in the 21st century, not too many years after Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I mean, how come that even after those horrid happenings, and also the horrors of the Second World War, we didn't express in our buildings that horror. Why? I think we are cowards. As somebody said, I forgot who said it, an important philosopher said that optimists are cowards. Well, those who do not express the shadows of life or who do not acknowledge them, I would say they are cowards too. And terror firma, this is what Peter Eisenman said. Now, Peter Eisenman, you know, plays linguistically in sometimes vicious ways. He was paraphrasing the Latin saying, and terra firma. And he transformed terra in terror. I actually responded to Peter Eisenman in let's call it an essay I wrote, and I paraphrased in my turn Peter Eisenman. I transformed enterror firma in enteos firma. So from entera firma to enterror firma to enteos firma. Theos, of course, meaning God. Now, Michael Hansmeyer, this is a contemporary architect who works digitally in a very sophisticated way, and he created these digital grotesques, as he calls them, grotesques. These are done, printed, 3D printed and generated, of course, digitally. There is an abundance of ornament which could be called grotesque or grotesque. Although maybe in this case, the word is a little bit problematic, I would say. Now, Mark Foster Gage, who is a professor at Yale University now in the present, he did this incredible proposal for a new Guggenheim Museum in Helsinki, which will shock you. Look at this. To me, it has to do with hell. This kind of, you know, abhorrent ornamentation, which is grotesque, is a form of hellish architecture. Then look at details of the building. And again, this is a contemporary architect. He's not even an older architect. He's rather young. What made this man need such a project, such a building? To me, it is hellish. It is hellish. It is, I don't know if that's what he intended to evoke, but to me, this is a hellish building. Mark Foster Gage, you can check, you know, his website on the web. Now you could say this is an aberration. Yes, hell itself is a so-called aberration, but this aberration is part of life. It exists. Are you saying that the gas chamber was not an aberration? Or would you say that the nuclear bomb was not an aberration, killing hundreds of thousands of people in 1 second? There were horrible aberrations. Even the word horrible is not strong enough. Yes, there is horror here, I agree. The Bomarzo Park in Italy, this is an old work. Look here, terror again in stone. This head is looking at hell. And the expression expresses that, the facial expression. This was built, I don't know in what century, the 18th century in Italy, maybe a little early. Anyway, it's an older work in the Bomarzo Park in Italy. It has to do with hell, architecture and cruelty. Here I couldn't elaborate because again this presentation has it needs improvements. I began this to explore the theme, and when I checked on when I searched for architecture and cruelty on the web, I came across these pictures, but the justification is not yet here. But in essence, it's about the collapse of the civilization, is the collapse of order as we envision it, and you know, the disaster that ensues, that follows, is you know, represented in these images. But I will not insist now on this. Claude Parent and Paul Virilio. Claude Parent, a French architect, actually both Parent and Virilio were architects. Paul Virilio wrote some, you know, influential books, and they built this church. The reason I show churches is because you cannot talk about hell without also talking about churches and about faith or lack of faith. But this is a very unusual church, and you'll see immediately why. Look at this. It's actually a bunker. It's all of concrete. It's very, in a way, very you know, misanthropic, uninviting. It's a bunker. It's a you know, massive construction in concrete that, if you didn't know what it was, you wouldn't say it's a church. Well, that's what it is. It's a church. But it's a church which I think in its mute way or unexplicit way acknowledges the hell, maybe the hell of lack of faith. But I prefer something like this to a lying cathedral, which is demagogically trying to convince me that everything is fine, that God is, you know, an authority that takes care of everything, and that paradise is unavoidable. This, at least, is, I mean, this building, which was built after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I'm not saying it referenced in any way Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it's a church that was built after the horrors of the Second World War. Hans Pölzig, an important German architect who worked also as a stage designer, and he did a stage design for this important expressionist German movie, Der Golem, which has to do with fear and thus hell. You can tell the interior, I mean, Hans Pölzig lived in the 20th century, but the architecture he envisioned and he actually built as a set design, as a stage design for the movie, is very viscerally medieval. If we are in the field of films, I would say that the Blade Runner, which was a very, very, very admired film by the architecture students at Columbia University in New York in the 90s, also shows an architecture of hell. A very dark, in fact, I attended a conference, a lecture given by the stage designer of that film, Anton Furst, who actually committed suicide a few years later. Although he was a very successful stage designer, he was an architect, and he designed the stage design for the film, The Blade Runner, a very dark film. So, you know, humankind always, well, not in architecture explicitly, although here is architecture, but this is what Hans Pölzig imagined making the, you know, the stage design for this film. But most of the time, architects don't bring to consciousness this theme of the hell. So this is still Hans Pelzig, some sketches. Now Massimiliano Fucci, an important contemporary architect, he's Italian, and he built a few things which in my opinion are very related to the theme architecture and hell. For example, a cemetery in Italy. I don't even know how he was able to build this. You know, it's an image of hell on earth. Maybe he wanted, I mean, not maybe, he wanted to express the darkness of the finality of life, and strangely perhaps he was allowed to. I don't know if you see here, but maybe I have other pictures. There are some hanging pieces of furniture here, very precariously hanging from the bottom of this otherwise depressing structure. Now this is more luminous because it has the sunlight, but this railway actually hits a wall, which is a clear metaphor for the ending of life. You don't see in this, but maybe I have another picture with this. Yeah, here you see it goes straight into a wall. So it's a commentary on the hell of a life, which has a finality, and I guess faith or the illusion of faith is missing. Yeah, I should have had other images. Sorry, I have somewhere else. As I said, here there are some pieces of furniture, ruined furniture hanging from the bottom of this building. So it's a very depressing, you know, architecture, if I can use these words. Now you are going to see another building by him, which is a sports arena, and of course you would say, what does sport have to do with hell? But look at the elevation of this building. He built it in this way, and you know, it shows, you know, not only decay, I would say it shows despair. I mean, sport is supposed to be an optimistic activity, which you know, brings vigor to your body, and it's really about enjoying life. But this building expresses the opposite. Look at this. You know, it's hell. And again, I'm surprised he was allowed to build it like this. In Italy, in Europe, in the 20th century. Well, he built this at the end of the 20th century, not in the 21st century, but still in Europe at the end of the 20th century. He's a very successful architect. If you check Massimiliano, well, Studio Fucci, he builds a lot, and he's one of the most successful architects today. But as you can see, as you saw in the cemetery I showed, and in this sports arena, in both works, he showed, I would say, an intensive pessimism, which I connect with hell. Now, this is a sketch for a house for Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon being himself a very pessimistic painter, star of the British art. And Shakira Hamad, an Egyptian architect I was friends with, she did, you know, some sketches, so to speak, in 3D Max for a house for Francis Bacon. Where is the hell here? Where the hell is the redness of these visceral parts of the building. Otherwise, the building would have been quite, you know, serene and placidly Cartesian. But these parts that break through the glass facade express anguish, I would say. Vomit, for example, is present almost continuously in the paintings of Francis Bacon. So you have the whiteness of, well, in this case, the whiteness itself is a little bit monstrous, but redness adds to the anguish not just through the form, but also through the color. Anyway, but it's the beast in essence. It's the beast as an expression of hell, which breaks through the Cartesian, you know, order of the cube. In essence, is a cube. Now, Frank Gehry, the dancing house in Prague, which he called the dancing house, in my opinion, it's a hellish house, and I saw it. I was there, and I didn't change my mind. This is a hellish house. I don't see anything dancing here. Dance for me is not grotesque, but this is grotesque. And I'm not negatively oriented towards Frank Gehry. I've even made extensive presentations about him. But this work in particular, I think is hellish. He calls it dancing house. It's not dancing, it's hellish. The House of Dada, this was a project sent to me by an architect in India. When I launched a competition, a house for Tristan Tzara, well, the Dada movement itself was a movement that acknowledged the hellish parts of life. That's why it even gave the impression that was anti-art. And you see a monster here as well. So the House of Dada, or the house for Tristan Tzara, is a house inevitably connected with a monster, to put it simply. And we see here the monster. You could say the monster of technology, the monster of hyper urban development. There is darkness here. The essence of this project is angst. The Hopeless Cathedral. This I did myself some years ago, and I dedicated it to Emil Cioran. Emil Cioran, who I think he knew something about hell, and that's because he struggled himself with faith. And he paid the price for it. So I wrote A Cathedral Without Hope, because that's how I called it, a hopeless cathedral, which to me is hellish. A hopeless cathedral is hellish. A cathedral without hope is the ultimate oxymoron. A cathedral is an upwards movement towards nothing else but hope. This is why perhaps Nietzsche was against hope, because obviously he was against the cathedral. A hopeless cathedral is Sisyphus' cathedral, except that Sisyphus neither needed nor envisioned a cathedral, even if he was perhaps the one who needed it the most. But to build it without actually believing in its powers is to act against its true nature. Thus, a hopeless cathedral is a contradiction in terms, since oxymoronic. But it is better to acknowledge the inner contradictions than to entertain unsustainable illusions. So this is a view. It's just something I did with ArchiCAD. It's a top view, a view from the air above the building, and then this is a lateral view, a side elevation, if you want. And it is dark because it is hopeless, and thus it is hellish. This is another, in a way, is the lack of faith that generated this building. I'm not saying that I don't have faith. I do in my own way, but I am anguished by the falsity of what is being claimed as being, representations of faith in architecture right now in our country. The House of Crime in St. Louis, USA, again, a project by Shakira Hamad. I launched this competition, the House of Crime, and of course, crime is hellish. Why in St. Louis? Because St. Louis was, and maybe still is, the crime capital of the United States. And exactly in that city, ravished by crimes, Eero Saarinen built an arch that is the expression of optimism, of moving towards the western side of the United States. Those people who invaded the States coming from Europe, moving westwards and so on. And I thought that it's paradoxical that the city of crimes, or the crime city in the United States, has such a luminous Apollonic arch. That's what I said. I invited people to reflect on the duality of life and to show not just the light side, but also the dark side. And this is a sketch that Shakira Hamad did. And this is what Eero Saarinen built, was this arch. And Shakira Hamad created this architectonic parasite that is sabotaging the luminousness of or luminosity or the positiveness of the arch, because this would have added a truth which the arch by itself didn't have. So it's the monster attacking the Apollonic arch. But the monster was acknowledging the fact that St. Louis is the crime city, the crime capital of the United States. She didn't do this. I found this image and I thought kind of relevant, because this is the monster that actually exists in the urban fabric of the city St. Louis, and that's why it is the crime capital of the United States. Back to the 3D Max configurations that Shakira arrived at, and I think she's quite skillful at doing this sort of thing. And now she works with other programs, but then she worked with 3D Max. And yes, it shows anguish because crime inevitably is connected with anguish. The House of Gloom. Here I did, I don't know, a number of years ago, and I wanted to launch a competition across the street from where Émile Cioran lived. Why Émile Cioran again? Because it was 100 years since he was born, and I thought of paying homage to him through various architectural events. And I thought of launching this competition, the House of Gloom, in Place de l'Odéon in Paris. And I play myself with clay, and I just did. I'll show you what I did with clay that I thought was kind of what I imagined the House of Gloom might look like. Is this. In a way, it's not very dissimilar from that church by Claude Parent and Paul Virilio that you saw some minutes ago. I just played with clay. But if this was built, let's say in raw concrete, probably would have expressed my feelings about the House of Gloom. And gloom is also connected with hell. It's about being at a very low level psychologically. It's darkness, it's angst. I don't know if you know Place de l'Odéon, le Théâtre de l'Odéon in Paris, but this thing, if it was built just like this in concrete in front of the building, I think it would have evoked. And Parisians do know themselves something about gloom. They are rather pessimistic and dark, I would say, often. The Parisians, and so was Émile Cioran in his own way. And this was to be just across the street, actually, from where he lived. Anyway, now I also, at that time, I did a so-called cathedral, the red and black cathedral, which in its conflictual reality also expresses hell. Imagine a cathedral like this is the cathedral of war in a way, in a war, if you want, red and black, life and death. It's conflict, yes. But I thought that it expressed in a way my inner truth at that time when I made it. It's conflict also. And hell often it is connected with conflict, either external or internal or psychological. Piranesi, of course, talking about war and the prison and conflict, we cannot avoid Piranesi, a great 18th century Italian architect who expressed himself mainly through unbelievable etchings, engravings. These are called carceri, prisons, but they are expressions, I would say, of hell. It's an architectonic hell, which parallels the inner hell, the psychological hell. The hell may be within his soul. Piranesi is very relevant to the present, and very important architects of our time are very admirative towards Piranesi, from Rem Koolhaas to Wolf Prix and others. Carceri di invenzione. The prisons of Piranesi, the inner prisons, they represent interiors of buildings, but they actually represent psychological states, in my opinion. Levia suits, the present day Piranesi, if I can call him so, although he died in 2012, there is a lot of hell in his architectural representations. Look at them. He drew incredibly well, but most of the time his architecture is about conflict, war, and thus hell. Look, explosions, ruined buildings. It's hell. There we see a monstrous architectonic being attacking the old city. Apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic or pre-apocalyptic architectures. Hell. Hell in Berlin. Hell. Meaning war. Meaning hell. Meaning war. They are interrelated. This is though an interesting work, you know, it's, well, it's drawn impeccably, but you see the pastoral reality of nature, and then you see the metallic reality of the interventions of man. And it's a very interesting drawing, which shows again the tensions between man and nature. It's possible he did this drawing before the World Trade Center collapsed in a very similar manner. I'm not sure, but that's what I think. He did this before September 11. Another, well, the sky and the light seem to be rather, you know, positive, but in essence, the drawing shows again a hellish reality, in my opinion. Bombs, arms, technological entities flying or falling or whatever. It is war, it is conflict. And he even said, he even published a book called Architecture is War, War is Architecture. Hell. This is like in the Golem by Hans Pelzi. And look at this house, dark, hellish, ominous, ominous again, hellish, hellish. We work in this way, but we neglect that this might happen. And sometimes does happen. It did happen in Baghdad when the Americans attacked Iraq. It happened, metaphorically, exactly like this. Look at this section through the Cartesian building. It's the hellish reality that is hidden by you know, our luminous belief in Cartesian structures. Here again, hell, war. As you can see, it is war. It is hell. And here it is the meeting between, you know, let's say the architect or any of us and God. In a way, it's an image of the Last Judgment. No one is sitting on that chair, but any one of us could sit on this chair. The Last Judgment, the Day of Judgment. After his drawings, a movie was made in Hollywood, I think, with Bruce Willis sitting exactly here. And I don't know, I didn't see the movie, but I think I know what Levia Suits wanted to say with that drawing. Now I'll show you some projects which sometimes I show from the now defunct postgraduate program at the Institute of Architecture in Vienna, in Austria. It was run by Hernan Diaz Alonso, who is now the director of ICARCH in Los Angeles. And you'll see very surprising architectural works, which in my opinion also address explicitly or implicitly hell. Here they are at you know, the presentation, the evaluation of the projects within the school. A very innovative program, almost alarmingly so. For example, the first project that he initiated was to destroy St. Stephen's Cathedral in the center of Vienna and to imagine another building in its place, also a cathedral, but a very, very, very different kind of cathedral. Here they are. Interesting people, and they experiment a lot. They really push the limits of architecture, and I admire them for this. Now look at this project, if we can call it a project. Can you imagine? Yes, done with Maya. That's how they work. 3 semesters they studied Maya very thoroughly, and then the other 3 semesters, this again was a postgraduate program. So there were young architects who enrolled in this program, who already studied architecture, and now they you know, allow themselves to get crazy, so to speak. So this is a project. This is another one, you know, an infill house. You know, it's incredible. Now, I mean, when you look at it, you know, that's not what you imagine. It's a monstrous house. It's a hellish house, if you want. But it does tell a truth which this house and this house and this house and this house do not tell. And look at this. You know, you wonder, what is this? What the hell is this? Well, it's a hellish house. Again and again, they explore architecture in very, very, very different ways than we do. You could say they are crazy. Maybe they are, but they push the limits of architecture. We don't. The daily mini market. Come on, you know. Anyway, look at this. It is hellish. It is hell. But if it was built, I would have been now in Vienna to see it, or wherever it was proposed. I'm not sure if for Vienna or not. There are dark forces within each one of us, in our soul, in our imagination, they exist. And it's better to acknowledge them and express them than to lie to yourself and lie to the others that they do not exist. They do exist. This is one of the projects for the cathedral that replaced the St. Stephen's Cathedral in IAA. Would you say that this was a cathedral, or was supposed to be a cathedral? Not really, but that's what, and this one as well. It's a tormented cathedral. It's a mad cathedral. It's an anti-cathedral. It is a hellish cathedral. That's what it is. This one as well, a hellish cathedral. Can you believe it? And this one as well, you recognize here on the left, probably the building by Hans Hollein. This is the existing plaza. Here is where is the existing St. Stephen's Cathedral. And this is a building, a monstrous building that replaced it as a first exercise of the program Excessive, run by Hernan Diaz Alonso, an eccentric Argentinian architect. Another project from that program, hellish itself. But if it was built, we probably would have seen it, you know, right there, all of us. And now back to Shakira Hamad, who also studied there with her railway station for the Westbahnhof in Vienna. This is a, you would say, a post-apocalyptic project for a railway station. Look at this. It's hellish. But in my opinion, I prefer the so-called hellishness of this project than the lies, the placid lies of our Apollonian mimicked convictions. I think there is more truth here because there is also a psychological truth that we ignore. Look at the interior of this railway station. Does it function? Well, not really, not in the sense we imagine function should be. Very courageous architectural imagination. I know Shakira, she was very pessimistically oriented then and there, but I think this confrontation with hell, which also Auguste Rodin assumed, is very, very important for any creator in any field, including architecture. This is my belief. Fearful. Let me see what it is here. These are some sketches I did when I was extremely depressed and I was going through a terrible time in my life. And I didn't even realize that I did sketches representing kind of small, I mean, these were drawings like 10 centimeters by, I don't know, 14 centimeters. I made all of them in the plane that was bringing me back to Romania from the States, and I was really going through a terrible time in my life, provoked by me, of course. And I was just scribbling on white paper, and I didn't realize that these sketches were actually self-portraits of my hellish inner life. Look, these are abstracted faces, self-portraits of a man in who lost his soul. As I did then, I lost my soul. In fact, around that time, I thought of writing a screenplay about a man whose shadow, when he walked, let's say on the sidewalk outside, would follow him, but not connected to his body, like half a meter away from his body. But you know, what does this mean? That I was you know, fractured from my own soul. And these self-portraits, these sketches show this. Look, it is fear, just like in those gargoyles that I showed at the beginning. Look at the bulging eyes. I was totally lost. Me, the man who talks to you now, I was totally lost. And these little sketches represented the hell in my soul. I also did this sketch of the, well, sketch with the Photoshop, this distortion of Notre Dame de Paris, the cathedral in Paris, because it represented at that time my perception about a true cathedral, and that's what I did, monstrous as it is. Gonzalo Vallo, a very talented Spanish architect who works now in Vienna and who responded to an architectural theme I launched, Tattooing Vienna. And he he decided to attack a building by a father figure, that is Otto Wagner. So this building was built by Otto Wagner, and Gonzalo Valle attacked it with his skills in Maya and ruined it. This is also a hellish, new architectural reality. You see here the plans of what he proposed, working with Maya. So, the ruin itself has hellish connotations, no? Well, this is a man-made ruin in the sense that he attacked an existing building, and actually a famous building, and he, what you look at is what he did. It's intentionally he brought death and war and destruction into the building of Otto Wagner. Why? Because Vienna could also lie. And that's why also we saw the projects before. There is the waltzing Vienna, the Johann Strauss Vienna, the grandmother's Vienna, but there is also the avant-garde Vienna, which fights against the sweetness, the excessive sweetness of conventional Vienna. Peter Eisenman also, in fact, he said that an architecture that is moving us is never an architecture which comforts us. I'm not sure about that, actually. But he said that, and he tried to build himself some grotesques. This might not be the most dramatic, but here I only have a few pictures of the Wexner Center for the Arts in Columbus, Ohio, where, for example, this column doesn't go all the way to the ground, and if you walk up this stair, you almost get hit by the bottom of this column. So it's a threatening, or mimicking being a threatening environment. He was considered at the time a deconstructivist. He might not have accepted easily this denomination, but he was one of the 7 deconstructivist architects who showed their works at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, I think in 1992 or so. This, compared to what we saw before, it doesn't look too hellish. I would agree. Now, John Haydock, the House of the Suicide, and of course, any suicide, it belongs to hell. This is a monument he built for that Czech student who immolated himself in protest to the invasion of Czechoslovakia, former Czechoslovakia, by the Russian army. And it was a very sad thing. He built 2 structures, as you can see here, the House of the Suicide and the House of the Mother of the Suicide. And this is a little poem written by someone who also taught at Cooper Union in New York. John Haydock was the dean at Cooper Union in New York. The funeral of Jan Palach, that was the name of the student who died protesting against the invasion of his country by the Russians, which was hell, of course, hell. So here they are. I always forget which is the House of the Suicide and which is the House of the Mother of the Suicide. Maybe this is the mother. I was never able to remember this, but anyway, one belongs to the mother of the suicide, and the other one. Now, these spikes, what do they represent? They represent the same terror. Those gargoyles I showed at the beginning of the presentation is about terror, inner terror, suffering, in other words. The Fat House by Erwin Wurm, an Austrian artist. Now here we have a different kind of hell. It's the hell of abundance, the hell of eating excessively, the hell of fatness, where you eat and eat because you're actually not confronting your inner hell. That's why it is even known that people who in the middle of the night go obsessively to the refrigerator are people who have an inner conflict, an inner unhappiness, and they try to handle it through eating, through food. And this is what this artist did, the fat house. Look at this, it is grotesque. In my opinion, it is hellish. Even if it is white, it is hellish because it shows an unhealthy state of being. This is, of course, an expression of what happens in society. You know, when well, you can buy a lot of food, you can eat a lot, but this kind of obsessive eating is about because our soul is empty, not the stomach, but the soul. So this was displayed in front of the Belvedere Palace in Vienna, and when I saw it, I didn't know what it was. I was ravished. I couldn't believe my eyes. How something so grotesque and so ugly be displayed. Now here you have a house, you know, Adolf Loos, and here you have a replica by this artist, the Fat House. Back to the Fat House, which again, in my opinion, it is horrible. It is horrible, but it tells the truth about the obsession with consume, produce, consume, getting fat, eating, because at bottom, actually, our soul is sick. Our soul, not our stomach. Our soul is empty. To me, this is also hellish. It doesn't matter. In fact, it is even more hellish because it is white. Just as John Haydock wrote when he wrote about, well, he said that whiteness could be hellish, and he gave us an example, The Shining, that film, that movie with Jack Nicholson. And it's true, excessive whiteness, you know, because it gives you the illusion of some kind of a paradisiacal you know, condition, you know, whiteness as a sign of purity, but it's actually often, or maybe not often, but at least sometimes, whiteness could hide inner monsters who are not acknowledged. Like here, you see, it's a grimace. It's a house with a grimace. This is the other side of hell, I would say. The house of failed love. This is again me. Sorry, I have I put some things I did, and maybe a little too many. But anyway, I did it like this. This was the house of failed love. When myself I failed in this field at one moment. So it's a prison. It's not well, it's this Piranesi, but expressed differently. So this is the plan of the failed love, and it is a prison. Look at this. It is the mausoleum of a failed love. That's what it is. In a way, the opposite of the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal was the greatest expression of the everlasting love, and here is the monument of a terrible disheartening. Very simple in plan, but in essence, that's what it is, a black prison, the prison of failed love, which is also hellish, and I'm sure most of you know about it, because unfortunately, perhaps the French are right. Il n'y a pas d'amour heureux. There is no happy love. I mean, maybe they exaggerate a little, but the French do know something about love. And unfortunately, sometimes at least it is like this. There is no happy love. I don't know. I still hope that it's not like they think, or like this saying says. Anyway, let's move beyond the black prison of lack of love. Now we see another expression of hell in the works of this one of the New York Whites or New York Fives, in a way associated or associable to that work that we saw, the fat white house in front of the Belvedere Palace in Vienna, is Michael Graves with his grotesque, hellish Disney headquarters in Burbank, California from 1986. To me, this is hell. This is not joie de vivre. This is not the innocence of children. It's not innocence. This is culpability. And this giant, I mean, look at the height of a human being here, and look how immense these grotesque figures are. To me, this is hell. And it's the same kind of hell like in the white, fat house by that artist. Terrible work. Now, some say, and maybe even Bogdan, who is here, that he did it intentionally, but I doubt it. I doubt it. I wish he was sarcastic, but seen in the context of his larger oeuvre, I would say that he was not sarcastic. He probably thought that he was doing the right thing, but to me, this is sick. It's hellish. It's not, this is not healthy aesthetics at all, in my opinion. And thus, it is hellish. The House of Anti-War, now I don't know if I show this, I launched a competition to protest against the fact that the Austrians didn't know what to do with the house where the baby Adolf Hitler was born. So I launched a competition inviting to transform that house so no other war will happen. So no other monster like Adolf Hitler will be housed in any house. So you see now a few images sent to us, disruptions of the building. This is the building, the third window. This one, that's the window where the room was where Adolf Hitler was born. And anyway, this is another expression, a funeral expression, of course. And it is, yes, it is an expression of the hell of the Second World War and the hell, this man, of course, not alone, but he was a major contributor, so to speak, to that great suffering which the Second World War meant. And this, I think I end now this sketch of a presentation about the theme architecture and war with a project coming from the United States for a house for Adolf Hitler, because yes, talking about hell, we cannot easily avoid to also talk about this, the Führer. So these are nice drawings of a tragic house and a tragic biography that affected Europe and the world dramatically. And let's hope this will not happen again. I'm not sure what this American architect wanted to say here. I forgot. I read the text here today. They sent a limit. I don't know exactly what he wanted to say. Maybe to oppose to the, kind of like Villa Savoye kind of aesthetics, the tragedy of the blood, of the redness, of the crimes, of the hell, which the Second World War meant. Okay, that's it.